The cabin in the woods, the old cabin stood at the end of a winding dirt road, its weathered wood blending seamlessly into the dense forest that surrounded it. I had come here seeking refuge from a tumultuous relationship with my father, subletting the place for a couple of months from a man I barely knew. It was meant to be a sanctuary, a place to gather my thoughts and plan my next move. Instead, it became the setting for a nightmare that would haunt me for years to come. The cabin itself was quaint, a small kitchen, a cozy living space, and a bedroom accessed by a narrow staircase with a quirky hatch-like door. I had been there for a month already, settling into a routine of long work shifts followed by quiet evenings alone. The isolation suited me, or so I thought. It was on one of those nights, after a grueling 12-hour shift, that the horror began. Exhausted, I had made myself a meager dinner of peanut butter and jelly, washed down with a protein shake, before retreating to the bedroom. As always, I closed the hatch door, finding comfort in the barrier it provided between me and the rest of the world. The television droned softly in the background as I felt myself drifting off to sleep. That's when I heard it, a voice, low and gravelly, calling from below. "Who's up there?" My heart leapt into my throat, every muscle in my body tensing as adrenaline coursed through me. I sat bolt upright, straining my ears. Had I imagined it? Was it coming from outside? With trembling hands, I switched off the TV, plunging the room into an eerie silence. I crept to the small circular window above the bed, peering out into the inky blackness of the forest night. Nothing moved in the shadows beyond. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice sounding small and afraid in the oppressive quiet. Silence was my only answer. Gathering what little courage I had, I approached the hatch door. My hand shook as I grasped the handle, slowly lifting it to peer down the narrow staircase. The darkness below seemed to swallow the weak light from my bedroom. "Dad?" I called, a part of me hoping against hope that this was some misguided attempt at reconciliation. No response came. Heart pounding, I descended the stairs, flicking on lights as I went. The living room looked just as I had left it, no sign of disturbance, no indication that anyone had been there. I even checked outside, the porch light revealing nothing but the silent, looming trees. Confused and shaken, I retreated back to my bedroom, securing the hatch door once more. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it had been a neighbor, or just my imagination playing tricks on me after a long day, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. I had just settled back into bed, the TV once again providing a comforting background noise, when it happened. A series of loud, angry pounds on the bedroom door from below, so forceful I feared the wood might splinter. Terror paralyzed me. There was no denying it now, someone was in the house. And they wanted in. I lay there, scarcely daring to breathe, for what felt like hours. The pounding eventually stopped, but the silence that followed was almost worse. What was the intruder doing? Were they still down there? Waiting? When I finally mustered the courage to move, I realized with horror that my phone wasn't on the nightstand where I usually kept it. A sickening thought occurred to me. Had I left it downstairs? Knowing I couldn't stay trapped in the bedroom forever, I made a decision. I would make a run for it, grab my phone if I could find it, and flee to the nearest neighbor's house. The hatch door creaked as I opened it, the sound unnaturally loud in the stillness of the night. I crept down the stairs, my bare feet silent on the wooden steps. At the bottom, I paused, listening intently for any sign of the intruder. Nothing. In a burst of desperate courage, I bolted for the back door, not bothering to turn on any lights. The cool night air hit me like a slap as I ran, barefoot and terrified, towards the nearest house with its lights still on. I pounded on the door, gasping out my story to the man who appeared at the window. But instead of help, I was met with an unsettling stare. He just watched me, silent and unmoving, as if I were some curious specimen under glass. A chilling thought occurred to me. What if he was involved somehow? What if this whole nightmarish scenario was some sort of twisted game? With nowhere else to turn, I made the difficult decision to return to the cabin. Maybe, I thought, I had imagined the whole thing. Maybe it was just stress and exhaustion playing tricks on my mind, but as I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, I realized with dawning horror that my nightmare was all too real. There, sitting on my bed and staring at the TV as if he belonged there, was a man I had never seen before. I screamed, the sound tearing from my throat before I could stop it. He turned, slowly, his eyes meeting mine with a calmness that was more terrifying than any rage could have been. I ran out of the house, into my car, fumbling with shaking hands to dial 911. As I waited for the police to arrive, I saw a figure slip from the back of the house into the woods. By the time the officers arrived, whoever it was had vanished into the night. I never stayed another night in that cabin. As I packed up my belongings the next day, jumping at every creak and shadow, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Even now, years later, I sometimes wake in the night, certain I can hear footsteps on the stairs, a hand on the door, ready to reveal the intruder who has haunted my dreams ever since that terrifying night in the woods. The midnight stalker. The night air was thick with humidity as I made my way down the dimly lit street, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the eerie silence of the small Indiana town. It was 2013, and my usual 11 p.m. walk home from work had taken on a sinister edge ever since my car had broken down, forcing me to traverse the 3-mile journey on foot. I had just turned onto one of the many dirt roads that snake through the dense forest surrounding our town when I first heard it, the low rumble of an engine in the distance, growing steadily closer. At first, I paid it no mind. After all, the occasional trucker passing through on their way to Indianapolis was not an uncommon sight. Even at this late hour, but as I continued my walk, a sense of unease began to creep over me. The vehicle was moving far too slowly, and as it came into view, I realized it was a van, its headlights off, crawling along the main road I had just left behind. I quickened my pace, telling myself I was being paranoid. But then I heard it, the sudden roar of an engine, followed by the blinding flash of headlights snapping on. The van was speeding up, racing towards the turn onto my road, heart pounding. I broke into a run, the soft dirt muffling my frantic footsteps. I chanced to glance over my shoulder, my blood turning to ice as I saw the van turn onto my road, its headlights once again extinguished. Then, to my horror, it stopped. Both the driver's and passenger's doors swung open. Pure, primal fear propelled me forward. I ran as I had never run before, my lungs burning, every muscle screaming for relief. And then I heard it, the unmistakable crack of a gunshot piercing the night air. Without thinking, I veered off the road and into the dense forest, scrambling behind a large rock. As I crouched there, trying desperately to quiet my ragged breathing, I heard voices. A man, his tone calm and authoritative, spoke first. "I think she went into the woods," and then, to my utter horror, the high-pitched voices of what sounded like young girls responded, "Okay, sir. We'll see if we can find her." My mind reeled, unable to process what I was hearing. What kind of sick game was this? Were these girls willing participants, or victims themselves? The man's next words chilled me to my very core. "Whoever finds her doesn't have to drink the blood tonight." I clamped my hand over my mouth, fighting the urge to scream or vomit. What kind of depraved cult had I stumbled upon? For what felt like an eternity, I sat there, every snapping twig and rustling leaf sending fresh waves of terror through me. And then, like an answer to an unspoken prayer, I heard sirens in the distance. Relief flooded through me as I saw the flash of red and blue lights through the trees. I burst from my hiding place, running towards the road, screaming for help. But the nightmare was far from over. As I approached the police car, I saw something that would be forever seared into my memory, the mutilated body of a young woman, her flesh torn and bloody, lying in the middle of the road. The van was nowhere to be seen. In the days that followed, as I recounted my horrifying experience to the police, a disturbing pattern emerged. Reports of a van with the same license plate had been called in from across the country: Vermont, Nevada, Alaska, Texas. It was as if this roving band of killers was able to be everywhere and nowhere at once. I thought it was over, that I had escaped the nightmare. But then, one sleepless night as I peered out my window, I saw it, the van, creeping down my street without its lights on. I've since moved away from Indiana, but the terror of that night has never left me. Sometimes, in my darkest moments, I wonder, did I truly escape? Or am I still part of their sick game, forever looking over my shoulder, waiting for the day when they decide to finish what they started on that lonely dirt road so many years ago? He Phantom Caller, our life was the epitome of suburban normalcy, a modest house, steady jobs, quiet neighbors. My wife Gianna and I had settled into the comfortable rhythm of middle-class American life, our days predictable, our nights peaceful. Or so we thought. It was a Tuesday evening like any other. We had gone out for dinner, a rare treat in our usually mundane routine, and returned home around 9 p.m. By 10, we were in bed, the soft glow of the television providing a comforting background as we wound down for the night. The shrill ring of the phone at 11 p.m. was jarring, slicing through the quiet of our bedroom. Gianna shot me a worried look. "Don't answer it," she said, her voice tight with concern. "Anyone calling this late, it can't be good news." I hesitated, my hand hovering over the receiver. But what if it's an emergency? Before I could decide, the ringing stopped. I breathed a sigh of relief, settling back into bed. But the reprieve was short-lived. Moments later, the phone rang again. This time, I grabbed it, glancing at the caller ID. "Unknown number" flashed on the screen. A sense of unease settled in the pit of my stomach as I answered. "Hello?" The voice on the other end sent a chill down my spine. It was Al, our next-door neighbor, but something was off. His usually jovial tone was flat, almost monotone. "Do you know that man standing out in front of your house?" he asked. Without preamble, "What?" I replied, confusion and fear battling for dominance in my mind. "What are you talking about? Go outside," Al said, and then the line went dead. I relayed the strange conversation to Gianna, whose face had gone pale. "Don't go out there," she pleaded, but curiosity and concern overrode my better judgment. I went to the window, peering out into the darkness of our front yard. Nothing. No one was there. Steeling myself, I opened the front door, stepping out onto the porch. The night was still, the street empty. Whatever Al had seen, or thought he had seen, was gone. Unsettled but trying to rationalize the situation, I returned to bed. Maybe Al had been dreaming, or playing some ill-conceived prank. I called him back, but the call went straight to voicemail. Just as I was about to turn off the light and try to sleep, the phone rang again. Unknown number. This time, Al's voice was even stranger, slow, deliberate, almost robotic. "Go outside," he intoned. "There's someone standing outside your house." And then, once again, silence, my heart racing. I went back to the window. This time, I saw him, a figure standing at the end of our walkway, hooded, his face obscured by shadow. He stood motionless, like a sentinel of some dark force. I opened the door, shouting that I would call the police. The figure didn't move, didn't respond. It was as if he wasn't even real. The phone rang again, and this time the caller ID showed Al's number. I answered, my hand shaking. "Hey," came Al's voice, now sounding normal, confused. "I just got your voicemail." "What was that about?" "I didn't call you." The blood in my veins turned to ice. If Al hadn't called, who had? I put him on speaker, desperate for Gianna to confirm that I wasn't losing my mind. Al did the same with his wife. But as we talked, comparing timelines and experiences, it became clear that there was no logical explanation for what had happened. Someone, or something, had called us, using Al's voice, luring me outside to see a figure that had now vanished into the night. In the days and weeks that followed, we installed security cameras, changed our phone number, even considered moving. But nothing could shake the feeling of violation, the sense that our safe, normal life had been irrevocably shattered. Even now, years later, I still start at unexpected phone calls. I find myself checking and rechecking the locks, peering out into the darkness, half expecting to see that hooded figure standing there, waiting. And sometimes, in the dead of night, I swear I can hear the phone ringing, even when it's not, for in that one night, we learned a terrifying truth, that the boundary between the world we know and the realms of inexplicable horror is far thinner than we'd like to believe. And sometimes, that horror comes calling, wearing the voice of those we trust, luring us out into a darkness from which we can never truly return.